forms of life that may have landed from another planet. You know, I've landed from Mars.
Alex Karp just got on and did a new episode to his interview series, and believe me when I tell you this is the best one thus far, the most eye-opening in the business, especially not just macro, but they talk a lot about that. Alex Karp addresses the competition for what seems like the first time outward and directly as it could possibly be, risks to the business, the future, how they're building for the future, and so much more. Here are my favorite clips from it. A few quick teaser clips in the beginning, and then it gets right into it, and I'll be back with probably a couple more videos in the next few days to actually break this down, because once again, I think this is wildly insightful into the brain of the CEO here of Palantir, Alex Karp, and what is actually going on with Palantir well into the future. Here it is.
And then are opting for the best products on the market, which in this case will be ours. Products that we're building to deal with specifically disjointed environments that we haven't shipped yet. The not so secret of Palantir is an affirmation of our ability to do a narrow set of things, we believe, in a way that really no other company at our scale does them, and no other company seeks to do them because it's still so far outside the norm. But it's an area where we feel comfortable. If you build a business that is quote unquote disruptive, meaning you create something that would not have existed but for you and a team of people, and the software is kind of a team sport, building it, and that thing, in our case, product, disrupts and redefines how people think and work and play and live their lives. You have to have a view of what is going to exist in the future and work back from that in the present, and then iterate with a subset of a market that doesn't exist to build a product that then becomes real. And that was how we built our first product, which was built on the idea that the instruments of anti-terror, actually the kinetic instruments, as valuable as they might be, were less valuable than this resource that people thought was valueless, data, and that using data would also bring with it ethical problems, which is kind of a more technical version of civil liberties and data protection. So we did this many times, and people see that basic infrastructure, whether it's in the core parts of our society, which essentially involve socialization, foreign policy, dealing with emergencies, pandemics, wars, terror events, that there's a rise of simplistic solutions, and even they don't seem to work. Coupled and that with a dramatic rise of successful innovation, especially in the US. So I don't think people would actually be as cynical about dysfunction if parts of the economy were also performing as poorly. So in the US especially, you have just very interesting, very disruptive, very effective companies that are so effective that at some point companies struggle to compete with them, that create these enormous positive, and you could argue sometimes negative, attributes.
The other thing that I thought you were properly naive. Like, if you had realized in 2009, 10, 11, how hard this was going to be, I don't know whether you could have mustered the will to build this incredible team, to take this on, to be so radical in the sort of product, solution, software, etc. And so the other thing that I will say attracted me is there was I see the world differently perspective, which is what you had then. And frankly, I think what you still have. The world is coming to you. The world now sees the dysfunction that you referenced. And there was a certain, what do they say? The reason we send 18-year-olds to war is they don't know any better. We waited until they were 28, then they turn and run away from the enemy. You had enough of that. So it's sort of being both jaded and innocent.
Well, again, I do like this riff on properly naive, and I do think that's super important in decision making. And like in my life, like going to grad school, had I had any idea what it was like to really write a dissertation in technical German. When we co-founded Palantir, I was supposed to be something like interim CEO. And had I known I would be interim, non-interim CEO almost 2 decades later, I would have thought long and hard about that. Had I known that, we would, it would be very difficult to build new products, go into different jurisdictions. Also, the headwinds you have when you're doing something new and different, and also when you're not willing to simplify either politically, intellectually, or in a product form what you're doing. It's like the French metro used to have these things like defamatory about Palantir in like every metro stop. So it's like these things never really occurred to me, and they still exist. As much as I would like to, so I'm saying but we would like to become more, maybe subconsciously able to fit into normal structures. That's just not something that I believe we're differentiated at. And although the world has been, with kind of episodic interventions, more benign maybe in the past, certainly in the past than we believe it will be in the future, the not so secret of Palantir is an affirmation of our ability to do a narrow set of things. We believe in a way that really no other company at our scale does them, and no other company seeks to do them because it's still so far outside the norm. But it's an area where we feel comfortable. And that part of that, not all of it, but part of it is building software products around the assumption that the world will become more complicated, more disjoined, more unhinged, where legitimacy is more point specific and not global, and where the legitimacy of institutions has to be reasserted, recreated with a certain kind of facticity, because there's no ability to just say, well, look at the past and how well we were. You have to actually prove that there's output. And our software products, the major ones that are known, PG, Foundry, but obviously the ones that are less known, the ones we're using with the special forces, both on the back end and on the front end, products that we're building to deal with specifically disjointed environments that we haven't shipped yet, and building software are specifically built with the idea that tomorrow will be it'll be a step function in terms of complexity, where the step function, it will be accelerated because of disjunctions and lack of legitimacy of major institutions, and that other software products are built as if the world will be more static, more reliable, more certain, more able to deal with simplicity. Ergo, sales will be dominant, product complexity and innovation will be much less important than the sales and the way you pretend your products are, and that our sweet spot of doing this will become more and more valuable over time, more valuable tomorrow than it was yesterday. And that, by the way, has an important feedback loop, because it means we can keep the culture of Palantir the way we like the culture to be, i.e. one that sustains highly individual, often differentiated in the terms of their personality, people that are very, very focused on technical issues that most people, including most experts, do not believe exist. And so like we have this problem in our interaction with people that is very different than other companies, I think. The problem that other companies have, broadly speaking, is they have to convince people that they'll be able to build products that are relevant tomorrow. By the way, it's much harder than people seem to think, especially analysts have this weird idea that building software is like writing an analyst report, or lawyers think building software product is like handing in a brief. You can just hire one law firm to do it. If the other law firm, it's just factually completely not true. But the problem, so the normal company has is trying to convince people that they will build things that they're not going to build tomorrow, because it's not actually in their DNA. The problem Palantir has is convincing people that they need something that they will need tomorrow. And these are very, very different problems. We're very focused as a company on this, delivering things we believe you will need tomorrow, building on our internal view of what we're good at and what we've shown we're good at, while then often figuring out ways to modulate the product so that people who want parts of the product that maybe are a little bit more refurbishing your 90s enterprise-like can also have refurbishment. But it's not, refurbishment of your 90s IT architecture is certainly something you can use a modulated part of Palantir for, and it's a very important thing for kind of growth in certain parts. But our real differentiation is productive oddity. The more we do this, so we have this for a long time, and we've entered the government market, and then we've entered this market, and there are many markets where we are the de facto product people buy. Not all markets. What you see is, in the beginning, I thought we were differentiated in building the software and getting people to adopt it. And I do think we are differentiated in building software, again, software that becomes more and more relevant over time, and getting people to adopt the software right before they inherently understand its full value. So that's essentially, in more vulgar terms, getting people to adopt something that they will understand tomorrow better than they understand today. I do not believe we are differentiated in getting people to understand something that they understood yesterday and need to understand better tomorrow. And that because we've been, in all candor, so successful at this one thing, and because in over 2 decades of doing this, we believe no one else does what we do, it's much easier to be open and like, okay, we do this, we don't do this. And there are people who are very, very good at some of the stuff we don't do, like conventional sales. So, my essential pushback on sales was like my pushback on going public for a long time. It was like, how do you do this while maintaining our culture? My version of that was you couldn't do that. We didn't know how to do that in the 10 years ago, 18 years ago. But it seems like the thing we do is become more recognizably valuable. And that gives us a wider range of motion to also partner with people that do things but the key is, how do you do it without corrupting the internal culture that must stay reminiscent of the way it was in the beginning and rejuvenated to deal with new problems? That is a culture of product innovation and complexity. There are 2 pieces. What do we do as a company? Well, there's some things we're going to continue doing that we've always done. I would say, the software products you would need to deal with a dislocated world would have to be able to manage data in jurisdictions which are no longer connected, maintain software products, a myriad of them that are in your enterprise, where you are dealing with jurisdictions that are, again, disconnected, where there's a low trust environment, so you couldn't just ship the updates, you'd have to have them be verified, where the physical infrastructure you're relying on changes daily, breaks, where you would need to be able to create digital replicas of what you're doing because the complexity of the changes are just much greater than what you expected, where your underlying software that you've been relying on basically provides no alpha because it's not actually built for that world, and where you have internal workforce and political issues that also just make your daily issues much harder and mean that you have to be able to understand where you are as a company along the production and sales and regulatory and all these things that involve running a complex company that's now being kind of in the middle of glacial shifts. If you work back from our assumption, maybe there are skeptics, but it is our belief that we have a set of products that are underappreciated because the macro conditions have not arrived for their full value to be appreciated. Although very valued in many contexts, so vaccine distribution and manufacturing and biomedical research and myriad of preventive maintenance, all sorts of things that are well known at this point. How do we figure out ways to get institutions to both adopt and disseminate the product, but also the knowledge of how you actually deal with these problems. Institutions that are not always Palantir. And so we've been on a journey to identify startups in between, could call it half grown up companies, whether it's in the context of, people building their company. We have Founders for Builders. We've invested in a lot of companies. We're going to continue to search for partners that can distribute not just our software, but knowledge of what it means when things are just dislocating. And how would you use software to do that? Now you could say, well, that's obvious, but actually this is a completely new world. There really are very few experts for what does it mean to do product maintenance when you no longer have access to your core data stack, and when the assets are kind of at the edge of your enterprise and not at the center. What does it mean if you can no longer ship software to a jurisdiction? What does it mean if countries are in the middle of a near kinetic war for your supply chain? How do you get a supply chain to work if certain parts of it shut down? There's the software element where we know we have the right software products. There's the knowledge element, like how does a third party who's never really dealt with that challenge have a credible interaction with individuals that understand how to do that and then are opting for the best products on the market, which in this case will be ours. It is a fact that America, arguably only parts of America, but certainly as a country, produce a level of quality company and products, and purely measured on vulgar market cap, which wouldn't be my exact way of measuring, but is a measure that is completely differentiated from any other part of the world. And it's interesting, like the second most interesting place in the world for what the kind of things that kind of Palantir does is Israel. That's a tiny country. It's like,
so you think about, the snowflakes of the world, the data bricks of the world, and that product suite, as it were, compared to yours.
Well, that's both a shot at them and a could be a legitimate, critical, interesting question about Palantir. Our products are deeper than any other products on the market, have an institutional veracity that's differentiated, are doing things that are arguably more important. I don't think that's a really subject to debate. I do think what is a legitimate question is if a product is future oriented and requires a depth of understanding of the product, and or it doesn't inherently map to selling a wrench to a pre-existing technical org, will you capture the full value of those products? So I think you can ask the critical question of various companies. You mentioned too, there are many. Are the products actually thick enough to be valuable? You could ask the question of Palantir, is it thin enough to be fully monetized? And I think both questions are legitimate. What I would say is our view at Palantir is we're very differentiated in building these products before they exist. And on the thick part, we are without competition. So then there's a question of are we able to supply parts of our product or various products, for example, products that we're building now, products that we have in Foundry, to an enterprise that may in fact prefer something that fits into their architecture that is thinner. That gets into a very legitimate question, which is, okay, forget now. It's like, is Palantir building the product of the future, but willing to supply into the current environment by providing products that are more digestible into an organization that maybe it wants to go their own way and wants to buy a certain product for a certain thing, but does not want to buy all of Foundry. By the way, and so the answer in the near term has been yes, but in the future, we are going to continue to focus very much on what you're calling kind of thick, future-oriented products because they're differentiated. But then as the parts of this product become less differentiated and more, for lack of a better word, commodity, like there's 8 companies that supply them, figuring out ways to decouple the product and sell these things in a modular way partly because there's an assumption which is just not true that is very intuitive, that if you have a full stack product, that the sums of the product are less valuable than if they were taken apart, i.e. that each part of that product is inferior to a product that's just that product. But it's actually not true at all. It's actually the opposite. And part of what we will be doing over the next couple of years is both continuing to build things that are not understood, sell them to deal with the macro conditions that you have outlined, that I agree, but also democratizing parts of our product so that people who want a different version of the product can also buy it. We're not super ideological there, as long as our core mission is to continue to be entrepreneurial outsiders in the product realm, which is where, again, we would like to continue to stay in a world where we're not competitive. Is particularly valuable where dislocation happens and your institution will die. So there's going to just be an increased demand for that. How do you also disambiguate the products in a way that people who just want to buy parts of it can buy? And that's never been a contradiction for us. Honestly, every successful business that ends up being massively so not Palantir today, but Palantir in 5 years, what we will be, starts with the world's most complex problem, figures out solutions for it, and then figures out a way to do that tomorrow and the next day while allowing people to buy parts of it that are arguably less complex. And that's how you build not a business that is where we are now, but a business that is 10 times, arguably 20 times bigger. And even in America, people do not understand it's nearly impossible to build software products. So normal companies just buy them. Why do they? Nothing wrong with that, but why do you buy a software product? Because it's nearly impossible to build a new one. And you need to be a very specialized company. Most of these very specialized companies that do it have 10 people. We have 2,500 people, and Foundry has 400 products in it. Apollo is a completely revolutionary way of supplying, maintaining software products. Edge AI products that are coming on the market, completely not understood. The way in which we deal with AI and ML, completely unique. The anti-terror products that are not part of the public view are completely unique and differentiated. And this is a company that has 2,600 people that is still producing world-class product. And that's just something that is non-existent in the world. And that that's not a critique of other companies. They have a different solution. Buy companies, and nothing wrong with that. But you have to have a very different approach if you're attacking the market if you can build products than if you can't. By the way, it's recruit, retain, and lead without the people feeling like you're a dictator. World-class engineers, is attracting world-class engineers, retaining them, but retaining them while also inspiring them maybe to think differently about how they would build a product. If you build a product for engineers, you have a very interesting product that no one buys, i.e. where buying is a metaphor for worldly impact. So the recruitment and retention is a cultural plus, in our case, track record of doing this, which is unique in the world, basically, in my view, and in the view of the people that come. I mean, it's commonly known fact that Palantir gets among, if not the best software engineers in the world, and we've been doing this for a long time, and we're still getting the very best in the world. But de facto, we have a culture and people who've done this over and over again. But as an example, the biggest products we've built, I've personally interacted with the person who's built them extremely regularly, because it's like and it's not a hardware problem. See, in hardware, by and large, or in other things, or you say you have a law firm and somebody doesn't want to write the memorandum the way you want it. Well, great, they can go to another law firm. And arguably the lawyer who shows up the next day is even better. That is not the way it works in software. If your person who can build X product leaves, that product will stall or die. But then if you just leave it to them building it, you will get a product that is interesting, that has a total addressable market of 10 people. You could also want to say, how do you get the macro conditions that no longer exist into an engineer's brain so that you get the product you need while interacting with the client or a subset of clients to make sure the clients actually can use it, and also to make sure the software actually creates alpha for those institutions. And that is an iterative set of skills, but more, you could almost call them very productive creative habits that are super rare and mostly found in America for very complicated reasons that are hard for us actually to understand, but that Palantir has indigenously and that we plan to keep. Like, we get attacked in Europe. We get attacked in Europe for I don't know, data platform financed by the CIA. It was like a small investment almost 20 years ago. But one of the things I would say is you get the slings and arrows because if the terror attacks had happened, that our software, with the help of people using it, stopped, you would not have the slings and arrows, actually. If the slings and arrows, often because the situation is good enough, you can hate us. And we helped make the situation good enough, you can hate us. And, it's like, maybe that's the price to pay for what many of the things our software does. But it is an interesting thing that many of the slings and arrows are only the result of a situation that's good enough so you can, go try to attack the reason why it was reasonably good.
Let's end it there, Alex, but I'm glad we got a chance to do it. I look forward to our next episode of this little podcast.